Welcome to the Interreg Italia Malta I Know series of seminars. This is number 5.2 and it looks at the key business plan contents in a document that you create using 25 pages or less, as we will see. The I Know curriculum that we're in is track 5 and you can see that we're on the second presentation here. This is all about business planning and cash flow forecasts. So our aim really is to help you avoid the avoidable when starting off in business, and a major part of that comes from writing a good business plan. But we know that trying to sit down and write a business plan from scratch can be daunting, but it's much easier if you break it down into small bite-sized chunks. It really is an important tool for management since it must identify objectives and milestones, the people and facilities, equipment needed, and the cost to be incurred along the way. It provides a tool, therefore, for you to monitor progress and to manage the budget. But unless you have an idea of where you need to be, it's very difficult to determine if you're off course. Certainly, if you need to raise finance to start your business, then the business plan is the document that any financier, banks, investors, even grant funders will need to see. So it is a vital document. We break it down into very straightforward components, 5 main sections and then the 6th one for appendices. We'd say it should never exceed more than 30 pages and we recommend 25, of which the most important is the single-page executive summary. So the sections you can see are the executive summary, about 1 page, the introduction, maybe 6 to 8 pages, the business opportunity, perhaps 8 to 10 pages, the management team, just 1 or 2 pages, and then the operating plan, around 6 to 8 pages. Appendices we don't count in the page count, but certainly be restrained and don't include more than you need to do. Now, I can't overstress the need for the executive summary to be a 1-page summary, and that's really important. Many people struggle to bring down their concept and their ideas, often if it's a technology-based business, into 1 page. But it really is an important thing to do so that you get the reader to quickly understand what your business is all about. So as you can see on slide 7, the executive summary, what to include, it really is comparatively straightforward. Firstly, the nature of the product. Secondly, how it evolved. Thirdly, what your intellectual property position is, in other words, that you own it or that you plan to protect that ownership, how you intend to develop the products, what the commercial opportunity is, and then finally what resources you need to make this business plan work. The introduction is around 6 to 8 pages. 2.1 is simply to provide any reader with a brief overview, so please assume no prior knowledge here on behalf of the reader. The technology, if that's appropriate, review, not all business plans will need it, gives you a chance to expand a little further. But again, avoid jargon. As you can see on slide 9, section 2.3 relates to intellectual property. But please don't get confused between intellectual property and intellectual property protection. Intellectual property, or IP, really is all based upon know-how, knowledge. Whereas intellectual property protection, such things as patents or trademarks, are very different. Here, you have to identify both, what it is that you have and own and how you're protecting it. Occasionally, some businesses take out licenses from other companies to allow them to operate, so section 2.4 is where you would have to explain that if that applies to your business. Section 3 is the business opportunity, and here you must draw upon the market research that you've done. It really is an important part of the plan, but don't go over more than 8 to 10 pages. It should have a logical flow, a summary of the market overall, description of your products and services, summary of the competition, and then your commercial strategy and what you believe is your market potential. 3.1 then is the overall market description, and that includes information about how people buy and when they buy. The target products, quite straightforward, keep it simple, use if necessary photographs or line drawings, but give a sense of what it is that you're going to sell. 3.3 is the competition, and again let me stress, don't be afraid. It's important, however, to provide an objective assessment. It's good that there is competition because it shows that people are selling similar things to what you wish to sell, but you've got to have an objective assessment of how your product or service compares, and that's never easy. A comparative table is very, very useful, however. The commercial strategy is really about the type of product that you have and how you intend to get that to market. This may be no more than a marketing campaign, perhaps even a simple one like leafleting businesses in your local town, or it might range through to a national television advertising campaign, or more often these days involving social media. The market potential is where we need you to be realistic and reasonable. If you've got market data, we really want you to identify how much of that market you think you can capture. And many founders overestimate the amount that they can capture and how quickly they'll capture it. So again, always try to be reasonable and realistic about the market potential. Management is really, really important, and obviously it's going to feel a bit awkward writing a piece about yourself, but the business plan is going to be very, very focused on the management team, because it's the team that can deliver the plan. And so all financiers, if you're looking to raise finance, are really, really interested in this section. So make sure that you do a good job of writing about the management team. Firstly, 4.1, that can be for limited companies, directors or partnership or owners. And, again, financiers want to know who is in charge. Maybe a couple of paragraphs per person. Describe the relevant experience, but just basically wanting to reassure the reader that there's a right management team in place to lead this business. Don't forget in section 4.2 other key managers. They may be critical for the operation of the business, even if they're not necessarily directors or owners. And don't forget consultants. People like accountants can be included in section 4.3 because they are part of your team. The operating plan is really the meat of the business plan. And this is what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, but you've got to identify key milestones along the way that allow you to identify progress that you're making. 5.1 then starts at the earlier stage, particularly for young and often high-tech companies. Plans will heavily focus on research and development and creating a product. So if you intend to manufacture one, then the manufacturing plans become critical. Will you do that in-house or will you contract it out? So we think it's helpful to include a 6-point checklist, as you can see in the next slide. Number 1, what needs to be done for any product under development and what are the milestones? Number 2, what needs to be done for any product already in manufacture? And again, what are the milestones? Number 3, what people will you need in order to do the work? Number 4, what facilities and equipment will you need as you progress through the milestones? And number 5, how much of that work will be contracted out to third parties? And who will the contractors be? Remember that if you're contracting work out, those contractors may already have the equipment necessary and the facilities, so you may not need to buy that yourself. But ultimately, the 6th point is, what will all of the above cost? If you need corporate alliances, 5.2 is the section to identify that. We don't mean straightforward things like stationery suppliers, but if you've got specific suppliers of raw materials that can't be sourced elsewhere, then these are the people you have to form some kind of corporate alliance with in order to ensure continuity of supply and to make sure that supply is consistent, in particular, consistent in quality. Resource requirements then are identified in 5.3, and it follows this process. You begin by defining what you want to do, then you define how you intend to do it, and this point is where you define what resources will be required. Remember that there are 3 main resource areas to consider. Human resources, firstly. Secondly, capital for premises and equipment, sometimes called capital expenditure or CapEx for short. And then operating capital to run the business, sometimes called OPEX, short for operating expenditure. Of these 3 forms, human resources are considered in terms of who you will need for the business and when you will need them. And often you don't need them all at the same time. The financial analysis then brings everything together and allows you to put a costing forward. So this part of the business plan should be comparatively simple at the end of the work you've completed, and you'd expect to complete this last. The sequence is shown in the next slide. Again, a 6-point plan. Firstly, develop your operating plan. Secondly, work out your headcount needs. Thirdly, work out the monthly consumables costs. Fourthly, define facility and equipment needs. Fifthly, cost out any external contracts. And finally, number 6, predict what sales you will achieve. And you'll see that all of that has to be done on a monthly basis. The spreadsheets that you can use to put everything together then may be summarised as follows. And again, there are 6 that we recommend. Number 1, hiring strategy, a simple spreadsheet using Excel. Number 2, the overall operating expenditure, including things such as salaries, phone bills, raw materials, etc. Capital expenditure looks at costs of things like equipment, vehicles, and so on. Overall external contract costs, the money you have to pay to your contractors, and then sales estimates. And the final one is a summary of all of the previous 5, and that's your overall cash flow forecast. We'll look at that in more detail in another of these seminars. In the appendices then, it's really up to you. We recommend just 3 things: CVs for the manager, forecast, and perhaps any other spreadsheets used to create that, and if you have any promotional material, brochures. When we say anything else, again, be restrained. So just to finally come to where we want you to end up, that's the executive summary. We're returning to this section because we think you should write it at the end. And again, to remind you, we want you to include what your product is and how it's used, how it evolved, just a brief history, what your intellectual property position is, how you intend to develop products, what resources you need, the commercial opportunity, and assessment of the competition and any business development pitfalls. In conclusion, the business plan constitutes an important management tool. It allows you to plan, but you can use it as you go forward to manage the business once you've launched. So it's a monitoring tool as well. It can change though, so think of it as a living document, and it can and should evolve over time, something to review at least quarterly and probably once a month. So that's the end of this presentation, and thank you for your attention.